Commence primary ignition.
I'm actor Chris Bartlett from The Mandalorian, The Book of Boba Fett, and Obi-Wan Kenobi, and you're watching Virtual Cantina Network.
Hello there. Welcome everybody to the first Virtual Cantina Watch-Along of 2024. Hope everybody had an absolutely incredible New Year's. We're glad to be back. We're also glad to be starting Ahsoka Revisited and getting to actually do everything we planned to do during the strike, which is absolutely awesome that we can do this now and hear the stories behind there. But before we get to our very special guest tonight, sitting chewing tonight is Dave, or Dave Foloney, as he's wearing his Ahsoka Lives t-shirt. How are you, Dave?
I am doing well this evening. I hope everyone else is.
Yes, and I've got Jeff here. How are you, sir?
Good. Also doing well.
Excellent. And the return of the governor, Mr. Notman. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great. I'm really looking forward to talking to an individual that really made a huge contribution to the Ahsoka series. So I'm really excited to be here tonight. Thank you.
So without further ado, let's welcome him back to the Virtual Cantina, Mr. Hal Hickel. Hal, how are you, sir?
I'm good. Good to see you guys. Happy New Year. That's
Happy New Year.
Good to be back on the show.
So what have you been up to? There's been a lot of time between the last time we saw you.
There's been a lot of interesting things happening since we saw you last.
Yeah, I had a very slow summer, like practically everyone else working in film. And then in the fall, I ended up working on a kind of a crazy project that couldn't be further from, well, in some ways it kind of fits with Star Wars in a weird sort of way, but it couldn't be further from the movie world. We did a piece for the band Kiss.
For
their final concert. They've been on tour, and they played their final concert in Madison Square Garden at the beginning of December, and we produced a piece that played at the end of the show on their big sort of mega screens in the arena. That was kind of part of what's next for the band now that they're going to retire from touring. So that was super fun. We get to work with the band a bit, motion capture them, and create these kind of larger than life avatars. This is a sort of Uber version of the band, and have them play, one of their songs. And it was kind of like a music video, but also kind of like an extension of the concert. So it was super fun, super duper fun. And then went to New York to see the concert and see how the piece played live in the stadium with the fans. And that was really exciting.
Cool. So will that be available elsewhere other than if you were lucky enough to be there, or?
Well, I haven't checked lately. Right after it aired, like the evening it aired, they started putting stuff on their official websites that were kind of like, that showed bits of it, but also behind the scenes stuff, interviews with the band and kind of that kind of thing. I don't know if the whole piece, just as it screened in the arena, has yet been put online. I haven't checked. It might be, but big chunks of it were. It's not a very long. It's about a 2.5 minute piece, but a good portion of it was contained in the videos that I have seen. I just don't know if the whole piece ever got put on there.
Nice.
But yeah, it was super fun and different than anything I'd ever worked on. So that was really fun. And that's been most.
Very excited to.
Oh, go ahead.
That's great. So very, very excited to have you come on. And I know that when we were discussing which episode for you to come on, you said the first one you were particularly proud of. I could say that what an incredible series overall. Very, very well received. Obviously, unfortunately, the late great Ray Stevenson could not get his flowers for this because I think he was the standout for this series. And the character is so intriguing. But for those of us who were actually in London to actually get to see him on stage with the cast was actually kind of cool. But it's very, very exciting. Obviously, there's a lot of expectation, especially for us Star Wars fans who followed Dave Filoni's previous work, especially with Clone Wars and with Rebels. When was talks really first started about doing this, and how much did Dave want to try to make the transition that much smoother between going from the medium of animation to live action characters?
Well, I mean, we kind of built a little filmmaking family on the Mando series, and it's not always exactly the same group on every season. For instance, Richard Bluff was the visual effects supervisor on seasons 1 and most of 2, but Grady Kofer was the visual effects supervisor on season 3, but Richard was again the visual effects supervisor on this. But aside from a few little change outs like that, depending on the season and what everyone's doing, it's kind of a tight-knit little group. And Dave and John, of course, are the nucleus, the center of this whole thing. And when it's Mandalorian, it's kind of the both of them, with John, I think, kind of doing most of the writing, but Dave doing a significant amount. And then this one was more like Dave was, really kind of the main thing, but John was in the mix and on nearly all the calls and always there to talk through stuff with Dave. And I don't even know how much contact they have outside of our reviews, but just in the reviews I'm in, I see both of them there all the time. So like in terms of like the transition from Mandalorian to this, that felt seamless. It felt like going on to another season of Mandalorian with differences. I mean, again, it's very much Dave's show and his aesthetic and all that. Then on top of that, there was knowing the whole history of the animated series and knowing that that makes Dave a different kind of showrunner, a different kind of director. He thinks about things, I mean, he's learned a lot as a live action director since season 1. And he's become a great live action director. But I still think a lot of the way he plans things and thinks about sequences and design sequences is very rooted in his years as an animation director. So in other words, he visually plans constantly and tries, unless a new idea is absolutely better, he tries not to deviate from the plan. Because like in animation, you can't shoot like tons and tons of takes and then kind of find it in the edit. You've got to plan ahead, animate what the plan is, because it's just too slow and expensive to do it in any other way, and then cut that in and only make changes when it becomes absolutely necessary. And he kind of likes to do that. Whereas I feel like John is a director who likes to keep things, because he comes from not only a live action background, but a comedy background in many ways. I feel like he's a director who likes to, find the funniest joke and riff on things and keep stuff as movable and plastic as long in the process as he can, to always like find the best idea. So in those ways, they're kind of different. And I think it's because of Dave's animation background that he's different that way. And he's learning, though. I think he's starting to learn the benefit. Well, not starting. He's been learning since season 1. But he's learning the benefit of, yes, there's the plan. But there are times when it's perfectly okay to pull up the railroad tracks and go off in a different direction, even if it's a little maddening for everyone and potentially expensive or whatever. There's still good times and good reasons to do that. So, but yeah, one of the cool things about these characters having this whole years long, decades long now backstory in animation is that we could do things like when we started to do shots with Chopper, we Dave put us in touch with, his peeps at Lucasfilm Animation who had headed up all the Chopper animation up to that point. And they took us through all the ins and outs of Chopper and what makes him feel and look like Chopper. And Chopper does this, but he doesn't do that. And his little arms do this, but they don't do this. And, all that, all the do's and don'ts. And that was really great. Super informative for our animators who were trying to make sure that it felt like Chopper when you saw him on screen. So that was one of the great things.
One of the things I loved about this, and obviously a lot of people came with the expectation that it was probably going to be Rebels season 5 off the bat, which in some ways it was, in some ways it wasn't. But to me, being a fan of Rebels, it didn't feel like there was it was so jarring. Oh my God, we're starting up with animation and now we're in live action. It almost seemed like it was a smooth transition between the two that didn't feel like there was any sort of, was there, people very cognizant of that when they were starting the planning phases of the show?
Oh yeah. I mean, if it felt smooth, I think that's just down to a ton of hard work by Dave, but then all of the department heads, like costumes, for instance. Beginning with casting and writing and all that, but then, just taking costumes as an example, a ton of work was put into, let's just talk about Sabine for a minute, like her outfit, like before she puts the armor on and then puts the armor on, because translating stuff that looked fun and graphic as animation on an animated character that's very stylized, trying to make that into a real world thing that feels like it lives in the same universe as The Mandalorian and all of live action Star Wars, but it's still recognizably that character, that outfit from the animated series. It's just a lot of hard work. It's a lot of design work and a lot of trial and error and a lot of trying things. And then you get the actor who's been cast and you've got to kind of make it work on them and still feel like the character. So in every respect, like the stuff I just mentioned, all the props, settings, the T6, Hu Yang, all that stuff. It's just a lot of hard work by designers and animators and costume folks and makeup folks and prop builders and everyone else to kind of make it feel like, oh yeah, we just slipped from animation into live action, and hopefully it's not too bumpy for anyone. People are like, oh yeah,
so many parts were so very smooth. I mean, you were talking about Chopper, and that was
Chopper.
No second thoughts on any of that animation. It's amazing.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say, and part of what helps with certain characters, with Chopper and with Hu Yang, is that you get the original voice talents back. But then when you don't, when you have Rosario as Ahsoka and even with really any of the other live action characters, these are new actors and they're going to bring new things to it and all that, and so you just hope that it all works. But I think Dave just did a great job in finding people.
Well, in Celebration, when they asked him who played the voice of Hu Yang, he said, "Oh, it's the Doctor," and the whole place went absolutely nuts because they knew exactly who it was. But I'd be remiss because you were talking about costumes without bringing up the fact that today it was announced that the late great Shana Trupik and her team was nominated for the Costume Designers Guild Award for Excellence for not only Ahsoka Part 8, The Jedi, the Witch, and the Warlord, which was a fantastic episode, but also Mandalorian Chapter 22, Guns for Hire. Shauna and her crew did such a fantastic job.
Yeah, and it was such sad news to hear of her passing. But yeah, they knocked it out of the park. She was brilliant, and her crew did a great job. I'm really happy to hear that they're being acknowledged for that work, because it was super. It was Ray and then her, and it was like, what is going on? But yeah.
Kind of reminds me of back with 2016 when we lost Kenny Baker and then Carrie within months of each other. Star Wars just got hit.
We had just finished Rogue, and we did, that shot of her at the end, and Kathy showed it to Carrie, and she was really happy with it, and that made us all just like super glad. We're like, oh, great, that's awesome. And then just a few weeks later, she passed, which was just heartbreaking.
So we're going to be watching part 1 tonight, and obviously, we love to get a lot of questions from the crowd tonight. So, Dave, if people want to field some questions to Hal about, Ahsoka, Mandalorian, or any of his other properties, how are they going to do so?
So first, you have to learn Arabesh, and then. But no, in all seriousness, you can just put them right there. We're broadcasting this on YouTube and on the Facebook. Go ahead and comment in either place. For those of you who are in some of the chats on the Virtual Cantina Network behind the scenes stuff, you can totally put us some stuff there. We'll filter them through, and we'll get them to Hal any which way we can. So please go ahead and comment away in all of the forums, and we will find you.
Or I can open my window, and if you just shout really loud.
That's right.
You are maybe there.
So as a co-host tonight, Hal, hopefully I'll have the pleasure to ask you the first question. So I know you picked episode 1 as something that you wanted to talk about your work and showcase some bits and pieces. But what do you think overall through the Ahsoka series, whether it's this episode or other episodes, do you think was the most challenging for you in your remit? What can you think of that made you really sit back and pause and think, we're gonna have to figure out how to do this?
Yeah, I mean, we may have talked about this before in a previous visit, but the first 2 seasons of Mandalorian that I did, I was the sole animation supervisor at ILM for the project. Well, actually not at ILM, on the production side, which meaning I worked with ILM, but also other visual effects companies that we worked with, because we worked with a whole bunch to get season done. Anyways, starting with Book of Boba Fett, though, I helped out a bit at the beginning. Then I had to segue off to some other ILM projects, and Paul Kavanaugh came on. Then I got season 3 started, worked on it a bunch, and then again jumped off, and Paul Kavanaugh came on again. Although I came back on at the end of season 3 to supervise all the final episode and some of the next to last episode. Anyways, Paul and I have been leapfrogging like this for a while now. Hopefully, the next bit I work on, it's just going to be me all the way through. I think we're kind of past this phase of having to tackle a bunch of projects. Anyways, on this project, it was the same thing. I came on early. I supervised quite a lot of the work in episode 1, some of the work in episode 2, and a good chunk of stuff in 3. So I would have been happy doing kind of any of the first 3 episodes. I had some involvement with later episodes, but it was mainly the first 3. And I think of the first 3, easily the toughest thing, single sequence that I had to work on was actually in 3. And it's that long chase dogfight when they arrive at CTOS, and they're chased by you're gonna have to help me tonight.
Balin and Shin.
Shin and no, it's Shin and
Merrick is Merrick.
Oh yeah.
Merrick. And then they arrive at the ring, and then they get blasted, and the ship's disabled, and she goes out on the ring, and then they go down to the planet, and they see the whales for the first time. That whole stretch was a ton of work, a lot of and because and I know you guys are probably going to want to start the episode, but since you asked,
we got 10 minutes.
We have some sequences like that are, frankly, mostly visual effects, like a big space chase like that. Is you have the cockpit shots and the actors all talking to each other and whatnot, but lots of the shots are CG or visual effects of one kind or another. And sometimes those, before shooting starts, they don't get as fleshed out as we might like, because we kind of had to focus on the really actor-centric stuff that's going to be happening maybe on the volume or on location or whatever. And we kind of really want to make sure that's dialed in so the right stuff gets shot on set. something like the big dogfight, yeah, we want to know exactly what the dialogue is with the actors and what the main beats of the action are, so we know, if we need to shoot them turning left or right or whatever. But it generally sometimes gets less fleshed out. So that means it falls to previs, to visual effects, to really kind of hammer on it and figure out what are the shots, what's the shot design, what are the gags, how does that work, how are we going to tell that story that, for instance, 2 ships are coming at the T6 and she rotates the wing to split the 2 of them, and how do we tell that clearly, and yada yada, et cetera, et cetera. This was one of those sequences. So there was a lot of iterating on it. At once, previs was long gone from working on it, which is also fun, super fun, because you get to come up with lots of gags and ideas of, what the ship should do when. But it even gets into, just because of the way John and Dave work, they're perfectly comfortable with us saying, hey, wouldn't it be great if Hu Yang said this here, because then that would make them think this, whatever, and then we could cut to that, instead of just worrying about the animation and the effects. It's okay for us to like pitch ideas that hook into the story, and it's more holistic that way. It's not just, okay, UV effects folks, just stay in your lane, we'll worry about the story. That's not how John and Dave work, which is super fun. So anyways, that was one of those sequences, and it's very long and a lot of moving pieces, and with all the different parts. Richard Bluff did a lot of the heavy lifting in terms of figuring out the shots in the part of the sequence when Ahsoka is on the wing. I really worked hard on the lead up to that until they get to the ring. Then Richard, because it was a very complicated piece, and there were bits of that where they actually had Rosario or stunt folks on wires doing some of those flips and things. And so they really had to figure out, well, okay, the wing's rotating while they're flying, and then their feet meet it like this. And then, so there's a lot of technical stuff that had to be figured out ahead of the shoot. And so he really worked on that. And then I kind of picked up again once they're diving down toward the planet and they meet up. And then that whole beat where they run into the whales for the first time and are dodging through them. And that again, a lot of inventing and figuring out shots and what the beats are and how to tell the story clearly and all. So that was, for me, that was the most amount of work. But this sequence, episode 1, has a bunch of stuff that was really fun to do, like Sabine on the freeway, and you'll see when we get into it. But super fun stuff.
So, well, I remember right after we first saw the live action version of the Purgles, I texted you and I'm like, oh my God, that was great. And you were like, yeah, that was like super fun to actually work on, getting them to look great.
Oh, and I should mention Rick O'Connor. He's our animation supervisor at ILM, and his group did the whole whale portion of that. Nice. Brilliant work. And he's, his crew did, I think, all the whale work. I don't think any of that went to other vendors. It was all Rick and his group, and they did tons of other great stuff. Like in this episode, we're going to see Rick and his crew did the Ahsoka fighting the droids at that sort of ruined city.
Right.
So I, again, just in case it's sort of confusing, I'm like the show side animation soup, so I oversee the whole show. But that means I work with animation soups at ILM and companies like Hybrid and Image Engine and Ghost and ILP, all these visual effects companies that we work with. So, anyways.
So you're saying there that you don't always get the ideas of the fight sequences and stuff like fleshed out as fleshed out as you would want them, or you would think that they would be. Like, we've all seen old school kind of animation behind the scenes where, it's hand drawn storyboard and everything's pinned up to a bulletin board. And how are you getting stuff these days? Is it digital? Is it cocktail napkins? Is it
in our little Mandalorian filmmaking universe, the way we've done it over since season 1, we have a previs group. It's a company called Third Floor, and that's what they do. They do previs, and we have a group that comes in and they're embedded in our production. And so that's CG, it's 3D CG animation. Now, usually filmmakers use that kind of animation for visual effects heavy sequences, and they use it to figure out exactly like oh, we're going to shoot this on a techno crane and the camera's going to go up 30 feet and we're only going to build this much of the set and this will be blue screen and all that, to kind of figure out those things. Jon Favreau, however, since this show started, wanted to use it to sort of prototype an entire episode. So even just simple dialogue scenes would be prevised. And that was for two reasons. One, it was because frequently those kinds of scenes would be shot on the volume. So we kind of need to know what we're going to see anyway. So that could be, because that all has to be, those environments have to be created and ready to go before shooting starts. So that has to be part of the early planning process. The other reason he likes to use 3D animation, CG animation, to prototype an entire episode is so he can see how the episode's playing. He can just sort of test it out. So it's similar to what animated features do, where they would do storyboards, but then, film the storyboards and cut from one panel to the next and set it to music and all that as a way to kind of prototype the film. Jon does that with CG in it. So we have that, but we also have a 2D classic storyboard group under Dave Lowery. And Dave Lowery is one of the all-time brilliant storyboard guys, and he's got 1 million IMDb credits. Nicest guy too. And so, because sometimes it's quicker to just iterate with drawings, and Jon knows that, and so he wanted to have a good, strong storyboard group on the project. So there are times when we'll just say, why don't we have Lowery do that, and instead of putting the third floor folks on it. But again, it's for the reasons I mentioned and for other reasons. Sometimes, well, because the CG, the third floor guys have to get a whole episode up and running before shooting starts, some of the big complicated, mostly CG sequences. So think like in season 3 of Mandalorian, like the asteroid chase, when they first run into Gorian Shard, stuff like that, where most of the shots are CG and they're external. They kind of just get it good enough so that they know what to shoot inside the cockpits, what the dialogue is, what to shoot. But they don't worry about fine-tuning every shot and all the storytelling and all the gags of, should the ship come in from the left and strafe that ship and it blows up and then we fly through the fire. They don't. Some of that stuff gets worked up, but not all of it. And so that's where we'll take over. Visual effects will take over, and we'll start iterating on it and trying to fix the stuff. Not fix, but refine,
embellish, and that's it.
Refine the ideas, yeah. Whereas if it's a sequence like Ahsoka fighting the droids, that really does need to get pretty much nailed before we go into shooting, because obviously she's going to be finding stunt folks that we're going to replace with the droids, and everyone needs to be doing what they're going to be doing, because if they don't, we're going to be into like making a digidouble of Ahsoka and having to invent shots, and we really don't want to do that. So stuff like that, really, the third floor crew working with Jon or Dave, as it is on Ahsoka, really has to refine that and get it to like 80% there. And then, we'll take care of the rest when we get into visual effects, but 80% or whatever it needs to be to inform the shoot. So it stunts knows what they're doing, effects knows what they're doing, like meaning on-set effects, for pyro, stuff like that. The camera department knows what's happening. Everybody knows what they're doing, and they get all the right pieces when they shoot it. So
you brought up a really good point with the asteroid shot. Now, was it the same sort of mentality when you guys finally got to the Purgo graveyard over in Perelia?
Yeah, that was another sequence like that, and that evolved a lot. That used to be, they emerged into effectively a dogfight sort of thing, or like basically the Thrawn's fighters attacking the whales, essentially. Mm-hmm. And they merge into that. Then, and I don't know all the whys and wherefores and what led to what, but Dave modified that and turned it into a minefield instead. That became that magnetic minefield. Mm. That was an idea that came later. And so that needed a lot of, and Paul I was on some early calls before the minefield became a thing. And then I'd already segued off by then. And that whole, that was all Paul stuff. And I know I came in later. I'm like, wow, where did the minefield come from? That's crazy. He's like, oh yeah, now we're doing this and that. And but them diving down into the graveyard and hiding in the bones, that was always part of it. It took a lot of refining and figuring out along the way. But But the first part where they emerge out of the whale, that went through a lot of changes and difficulty, kind of hammering it into place and figuring out a good version of it.
So does that mean that there was work that your group or you were over that was replaced, or was that just everything they did after was in addition to what you did?
Yeah, not in that case. There was I think the version of that didn't have a minefield ended with previs, with third floor.
Oh, okay.
And then, they went off and shot stuff, or maybe even before shooting, Dave figured out the mine thing, but we just were like pencils down on that. And he shot the pieces he needed for being inside the cockpit and all that. And then later it's like, okay, and maybe, and I mean, I'm kind of making this up because I wasn't on it, but my assumption is that going into the shoot, they probably had a version of the cut, maybe with storyboards cut in that explains that this is a shot of mines and this is a shot of this or whatever. But that way Dave knew what pieces he needed to shoot inside the cockpit and could get all that properly. And then later, Paul and whichever company did that particular segment, whether it was ILM or one of our other companies we work with, refined and figured out what those shots look like and how to tell that story and all that. But Dave is great because he loves to draw boards for us. He'll be like, we'll be in a review on like a Friday where he's telling us, it could be something like that. Let's just say it's that, like, hey, well, you know what, guys, I'm going to send you an email later today, but I got some new ideas about this. It's going to be an asteroid field, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to make some drawings over the weekend, and then we'll talk on Monday. And then he'll come back and he'll have boarded like pretty much the whole thing. Like
that's got to be very beneficial to have that person in that role that has that extra ability to just sort of, here, let me whip out what I'm thinking, as opposed to having to, process that information through another person.
For sure.
Well, and I think the cool thing that it sounds like is you were talking about how Dave is, learning or has been learning to do live action, but it really sounds like you guys are doing kind of an animated version of this first. You're doing the animation in the previs before you're actually doing the rest of it.
For sure. And Dave really worked closely with Third Floor. There are some, like John works closely with previs for sure. I think he sees it a little more as a placeholder, kind of like, it's a version, great. And that, is going to, that's what we need for this stage of things. Whereas I think Dave really uses it like a design tool. Like, I want the horizon here. No, lower. Yeah. Okay. There. The sun should be right about there. And I want my figure. I want my figure over here. Not too big. No, that's too big. A little smaller. And the horizon should go right across about what their knees is. You know what I mean? Very precise that way. And that carries through. It's not like he does that and then it's like, yeah, whatever on the day. Then he shoots the gates and you're like, oh yeah, I see. That's exactly what we're doing. And and he'll be like I remember on the episode that introduced Ahsoka in season 2, was it episode 5, I think, 4 or 5. The way the dust would blow through the scene in many shots, he had all this reference from certain samurai films. I forgot it was Yojimbo or Sanjuro or maybe one of the others, but it was very, very specific. It was like, see how fast it's moving and how heavy it is and all this. And he would show it to Richard and be like, that's what this needs to look like. And so he's great that way. I mean, nothing is better for us than having clear direction.
Awesome.
And good visual reference.
We're at that time, so I hope everybody has their Disney Plus all queued up to part 1 of Ahsoka. Dave, why don't you do the 10-second countdown?
All right. Well, we are getting ready to there. So, Jeff, you're going to hit the thing when I hit the thing, and we're going to get there. And...
Now, do we need to talk at all about that some of us may have commercials and some.
That's what I was getting ready
yeah.
to mention right now. So, from a technical point of view, friends, if you guys have commercials on your Disney Plus, because that's like a new kind of thing, just go ahead and let it play through. We will keep our timestamp kind of where it is. Some of us are probably going to have commercials. Some of us are not. We'll work through it. If you need a timestamp and it's not there, if you get like way behind or you feel you are, call it out in the chat and we will get you caught up in where you need to be.
And if a majority of people are actually getting commercials at the same time, we may, kind of pause our, thing for a second, but probably not. Hopefully everything works out well.
So was the idea for
this crawl?
So was the idea for a crawl was that something that was from the beginning that Dave wanted to make sure that tied everything in?
I don't know. It'd be a good question for Dave. I actually wondered that myself. In other words, what did he go into this thinking? I know exactly what I want to do with the crawl. I want it to go up. I want it to be red, whatever. Or if it was like, I don't know if I'm even going to do a crawl, and then it evolved into this. I suspect it's a bit of both, but from whenever I first knew of it, it was this. I never heard any discussion of, oh, maybe we won't do a crawl, or maybe we'll do something else.
Right.
It's a great way to intro it.
An example of that. He's like, the ship has to be exactly square to camera, and they're like, no, it can't be slight. It's going direct the way he wanted. Like when he wanted symmetry, he wanted Kubrickian symmetry.
Right.
Oh, wow, that's tough.
And it's funny because it's kind of a Star Wars thing in some places, but it's definitely a set. Kubrick is great because it's kind of ties into a 70s sci-fi aesthetic, but it's a little different than Star Wars. So it's kind of cool when Dave dips into that because it gives it a little different feel.
Very nice.
So I love the we were talking about this when we first watched it. You see the outfits of the New Republic right here, and we're like, this is very much like Dura Crawley in Return of the Jedi, and I think people were asking Sean about before she passed, and that she went to the same company that fabricated the original costumes for Jedi to fabricate these costumes as well. Because this is to me, I was just like, oh my God, awesome. It's the same kind of feel aesthetically.
Yeah. That's awesome. I didn't know that. That's fantastic.
Yeah, the costumes are amazing.
And I believe blue was actually was designed and fabricated by Chris Bartlett. I think I saw pictures of him painting that.
If that's the droid I'm thinking of, that was a joint effort between him and another builder, but it was I believe he did the suit, and the helmet was done by someone else.
So this calamari guy on the left, they call him Jacris. Jacris was our visual effects producer on Ahsoka. We look in the credits, you'll see Jacris. So
that's cool. It's great to have those little Easter eggs of names and things.
He might even be in the suit. I'll have to ask him, but I know
that would be cool.
They named the character for him. But
that is
well, I know that Dawn Dinger played it later on, the calamari.
And Colin, our overall producer, is got a cameo too. I think we passed it already. It was the shot where it's like a control room, and you saw the ship coming into the bay. He was on the right in there, but
that's awesome.
Didn't call that one out in time.
See, I love this entire sequence and the pacing that they've got. It's just like, something bad's going to happen. This is all about to go wrong.
I love the arrogance of the,
Yeah. Totally confident, smug, even.
Yeah. And then the challenge, you're no Jedi.
Jacris.
That's such a great story.
And I joked when we were working on this season, I said, when this is all done, there could be like a drinking game where you take a drink anytime Shin blinks, and you would remain completely sober because she almost never blinks. There's a few places she does, but almost never blinks.
Awesome.
That
Speaking of
skewer
shit,
was
how about the fact that the behind the scenes shot of her driving the toy version of the land speeder went completely viral.
That's so awesome.
and then the second time she got to ride in it went viral as well.
Oh, yeah, from LA Comic-Con. Yeah.
Yeah. When she was reunited. This is amazing.
We actually sponsored part of the refurb they're doing of it with Maria. And actually, our logo is going to be put onto the speeder after the refurb's done.
Awesome.
Slight parallel here with Rogue One with Vader.
Oh yeah,
I thought
very, very much so.
March down that.
But Balin is a serious badass.
You know, getting it all a bit mushy here, but I'm so glad that we saw Ray in London. You know, such a great, personality.
That's pretty sweet.
And it's going to be very interesting. Obviously, we're jumping ahead and talking about the fact that they're pointing towards the Mortis arc, and you're expecting at the end more for the character of Balin Skull. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens. With hopefully a season 2 or anything of that nature.
Yeah.
But also awesome getting Diana Lee and Santo back as Morgan Elsbeth. She's so good.
And her yellow jumpsuit, I think, was a nod to her godfather.
Bruce. Yeah.
Bruce's jumpsuit in Enter the Dragon. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well,
Shauna,
that she had a lot of those connections were amazing that she had put together.
I was lucky enough to see Diana in when was it? A couple of years ago. She was inducted into the 501st. She's such a lovely lady in person.
She's really great.
Very down to earth.
You're genuine. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought she was Dunzo when we saw her in Mando facing off against Ahsoka.
Yeah.
So the fog's got to be in effect, right? The dust and the swirlies.
Yeah.
How crazy?
It's both.
Yeah,
but in these wide shots, certainly almost all what you're seeing has been added. Certainly there were fans on set to blow the costume, and usually there's some atmos as well. But yeah, and again, the same reference I'm sure he gave Richard for the speed and movement of the dust. And then
this whole thing with the lightsabers, the cutting of the lightsabers. The cutting of the lightsabers that Ahsoka is just about to do to cut her way down.
Whips them out.
And that was a duplication of a thing she did in the animated series. So they've sent us that clip, like, make sure it looks like this.
The only thing I didn't like completely about this shot is that the disc she lands on should have a slight taper maybe to the
because
the edge, because she went down, not straight down, but at an angle.
Right.
Yeah.
I hear you.
I get nitpicky a little bit when it comes to effects, but for the most part, this show does not have that.
So you're probably the right guy to ask. Was it always a plan that before the star map was revealed that it could be a complete nod to Fifth Element? Like,
I don't know, honestly. Dave's pretty specific about stuff, and a lot of this stuff he's been thinking about for years. I'm not saying it predates Fifth Element. That was ages ago.
No.
But just saying, he's been boiling it down in his brain, like design-wise, for such a long time that I don't know. But it certainly made me think of that. This pedestal, especially. Made me.
Well, you also see the shape of the thing holding the. It's like that's why it's like you're waiting for Cobra man, I don't have fire. Like Chris Tucker's character.
Well, we know too that this entire sequence in the star map and its similarities to the Mortis in the World Between Worlds, but not, that was the red herring since the logo was introduced. It's like that's Dave messing with us. Going like, oh, you're gonna get Mortis from the beginning, and she drops in, and then we're like, it's not Mortis. What?
my mind with this sequence went straight to the map rune in Indiana Jones.
Yeah.
Yeah, very much so.
For sure, with that, particularly with that shaft of light coming down from a single
Oh yeah.
opening.
But it's
also,
funny,
the first
touching
little
on. Go ahead.
sphere on the wall that lights up. It always looked to me like
Oh,
the
right.
Xbox logo. But
Yeah, Jeff was saying he's picky about certain shots and effects. I'm picky on dialogue. I trust Hal. Hal's got this stuff. I'm just picky on dialogue.
You were just talking about Raiders. What about when that sequence when Ahsoka picks up the star map and it burns into her hand, and that's completely like Raiders. Like we were thinking that later on, they're just
we're
building
like,
the
how
sword
is she
thing,
going to connect?
and she's
That's
gonna
how they're going to
flip her
find their way
phone.
there. That was very much in the back of my mind. Is that's going to be somehow part of how they find their way there is by the reverse.
wrong place.
I think it's like Hal says, it's all unintentional. It's in their brains. They're not
song for the.
That's right, for the Hebrew God who's whatever we honor. Yeah,
But that's also a credit to Dave, is that he's not only a student of the game, but he's a student of the film and animation and everything around there. So he pulls inspiration from the things that he loved, which is a lot what George did as well, and him being Padawan.
Yep. No, it's natural. It's not, and it's funny. I hadn't really thought about it that way before, but yeah, I mean, George had his inspirations, Hidden Fortress, et cetera, and Dave is inspired by some stuff from that era, but also, of course, naturally, he's going to be inspired by stuff George did.
And I think I've heard stories that what you were just talking about, that Dave was showing you, like the samurai films to get the speed and the thing, is didn't George cut together like the Battle of Midway scenes and stuff like that to get
The
some of the original dogfights with the X-Wings?
Oh yeah, Battle of Yavin was all because they didn't. You have to remember they also didn't have CG previs back then. So his version of that was to take shots from Battle of Britain, Dam Busters, and a couple other films, and cut those in. So just like shots of Spitfires or whatever, banking and dropping and stuff like that. That was his.
Yeah, and then like the close-ups and some of the other shots that he wanted the way it cut.
Classic British war films.
Exactly.
This sequence reminded me very much of the prequels.
Well, John always likes to joke that Dave's a prequel guy. And then Dave will go, well, I like all the Star Wars. John's always like, I'm more of an original trilogy guy. Dave's more of a prequel guy. Dave's always like, what?
I think I've heard him say that a few times.
Well, obviously, considering the fact, we got to talk about it. Obviously, the fact that we got a Hayden Christensen version of the Matt Lanter Anakin later on in the Clone Wars sequences, which were incredible.
Yeah, those are some of my favorite shots from the whole series.
He's just a guy playing another guy.
This is fun.
Yeah.
Whoops.
Little almost Acme. Warner Brothers.
Yeah, right.
Right there almost. This was great, good fun. And actually, you mentioned that prequels. I remember the first time we did a gag like that guy getting cut in half. Also, again, not knowing where folks are at with this, but where you see all the the glowing outline of all the different innards and stuff getting cut was on the prequels when Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan are cutting through battle droids and just sliding in half. So
I like the red arms and legs, and that interesting choice. It's like that's the C-3PO story right there. That's that story. It's all of this whole Disney Plus universe, the Mandoverse, is connecting all the dots to the sequel trilogy, and even little subtle things like that.
But this
is insane.
This sequence is we're not going to bother fighting here. We're just going to blow everything up.
So we had a question from Lila. She wanted to know how much time and effort was put into the design of the Loft Cat.
Oh, tons. We did a Loft Cat very quickly on in season 1 when they get to the common house on what's the planet where Mando almost falls in love? sort of-
Yeah, well, we know you're talking their version of indoor or whatever the
Yeah.
planet.
And that we only had to do 2 shots there, so we kind of we only made as much of the Lothcat as we needed, and we did it CG. Again, so it was just 2 shots, and we kind of figured out some of the language of going from the animated character to a sort of real world 3D version of it, but we didn't have to figure out too much because he just, he hisses at Baby Yoda or Grogu, and that's about it. So then here it demanded much more thought. And for one thing, Dave wanted to have a practical, real thing on set as much as he could. And so the Legacy folks built a beautiful puppeteered Lothcat that's featured in many of the shots, maybe most of the shots. I haven't counted them up. And then we took over where we needed to. There were times like there's a shot where it sort of has to hop down off the table or do different things that were difficult to do with a puppet. And we did those shots. It was a partnership, but the Legacy practical puppet is where the design issues got figured out. That's the team that figured it out. Like, this is what a real world Lothcat looks like. And then on the CG side, we just had to copy that. And I thought it was really successful. And being in Batu and stuff. So
I was going to say, did they reference the one in the cage in Batu at all?
I think no. I mean, I think it was different.
They redid it a bit. So
yeah. This sequence was fun. This was a very Jedi kind of, to me, feeling sequence where you've got big ships, little ships flying past them, and all that. Right. So this was good.
While we're on the topic of the Lothcat, we have to ask you, what's your take? Because everybody wants to know who's feeding Sabine's Lothcat while she's gone.
No. There you go. I'd like to think she's got a service that comes in or something, but
there's a droid.
Oh, there's Colin. That's the shot. Sorry.
Oh, okay. A little bit later.
In the
leave it to Star Wars fans to obsess about the fact that they're worried about the cat's well-being.
And then coming up in this shot, there's another ILM. Well, Colin's not ILM, but there's an ILM cameo coming up. Okay, so Ahsoka's coming towards us. I don't know what sync people have here, but now we're looking at her talking to Hera.
Yep.
Coming from screen left in a little bit, there's going to be a guy. I'll have to describe him when he appears. There, with a kind of red helmet that passed through, carrying some equipment.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. That guy's Landis Fields, and he's this brilliant kind of Renaissance guy, like super smart in a lot of different areas. And he's kind of like this nexus of a lot of different things that have to do with our virtual production on Mandalorian. And he's just this really brilliant guy and fun, smart guy. Anyways, that was him. That was Landis. Great guy.
You have another question from Chantal.
I haven't got my cameo yet. What's that, Spencer? Sorry.
There's another question from Chantal asking, did you work on Wolfie the Howler, as we've heard that was based upon Dave's dog?
Yeah, actually I did. Even though the Howlers were in the later episodes, before I segued off this show, I put quite a bit of time and effort into working with the animators on how they run and how they walk and all that. And then it was Richard Bluff, because there are a bunch of different ways we can do that. There's a thing called a motion base that's like a mechanical thing. And what you do is you animate a creature and then you feed the animation curves into the motion base to move the saddle around.
Oh, nice.
You've seen behind the scenes for like Game of Thrones and things like that. They generally do that with people riding dragons and all that. We were talking about doing that with the Howlers, but for a bunch of reasons, it seemed like it was going to be not the best way to do it, frankly. And I got to give credit to Richard Bluff, because Richard is the one who said, well, let's just bring in real horses on set, because they're kind of horse-sized. And even though they have dog bodies, they have horse proportions.
Gait is kind of...
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I was a little worried, because I thought, well, they may just end up looking like dogs that move like horses. They kind of did, but not in a bad way. Basically, what we did was this. I went and looked through some recent Westerns, picked a couple of shots that I thought were similar to the kind of shots we'd be doing, handed them to Rick's team in ILM, and had them copy the horse motion, but overlay the Howler on top of it. And it looked pretty good. We're all like, yeah, that's going to work. So we got a horse wrangler. We got a few different horses in, and shot all the actors on horses when they're on howlers, and then replaced the horses with howlers, and it worked out great. And that again was Rick's team for the most part. I think maybe our friends at Hybrid worked on a bunch of howler stuff as well, and they really came out great. And yes, Dave's dog Wolfie, Big Irish Wolfhound, was the reference for the fur, the sort of added tufting, but it's not clean, fluffy tufting. It's that kind of slightly, I don't know how to describe it, what wolfhounds have where it's a little wiry, and the tufts kind of twist together, and it almost looks a little coarse until you put your hand through it and it's actually soft. But anyways, that was absolutely the look for this. So some of the shots in here of Lethal, just going back to the discussion about the animated series, occasionally we'd be doing a shot and Dave would go, it should look just like this shot here from Rebel season whatever.
Right.
There are a few places like that.
Oh,
where we have
yeah,
shots.
and this, of course, being the scene where we see the mural, like the real life mural.
Right there.
Also, Doug, that they got Clancy to come in and play this role because
Yeah, this is
Oh my
great.
God! The fact that they got him to come back was incredible.
it was nice to get him to play a character where it could just be him, and it was fun to have him in season 1, but it was great to have him back as himself.
Well, especially since he did the voice. He did the voice of Ryder Asadi in Rebels as well.
Oh,
So,
right. Of course.
Yeah, but it was also great as
And-
a celebration, but also at LA Comic-Con to get the full set model of the mural.
The
For
San
fans to
Diego
get pictures.
Yeah.
Comic.
And that character in the background there was, I think Lane Liska made that. I don't think it was one of Rick Baker's Cantina creatures. I think it was a Cantina creature that Lane Liska built. But it's cool to another one of those niche, like, background things getting kind of put front and center, which is kind of fun.
Right.
I don't know.
Well, that's also quintessential Dave and John as well, like taking the background characters and bringing them to a forefront.
The figures they had to play with when they're, the leftovers that they like to play with, basically, is what they were. The rejects from their brothers or whatever, the older siblings.
So the music in the scratch music when Dave was planning the sequence, and it was in previs form, was Born to Be Wild.
Oh,
And it
very
worked so good.
Perfect.
That's good, but that was second to we wanted Beastie Boys Sabotage.
And
Although,
that would have been
that was used.
Right.
I know that's Star Trek.
That's hawking the Trek a little bit.
Yes.
But,
Although I've seen this cut with that music to it, so
have you?
yeah,
It
it works well.
But the
It's a great song.
Illuminati
This is good too, though.
was really good for it as well. It gave
Yeah,
good
I love
comfort.
the music they came up with. So this is another sequence that was mostly this is actually one that came out of previs baked pretty well. Like, it was pretty good. We just had certain things we had to solve, little smaller things, and then when she goes under the ship, the fighter, that needed a fair amount of work to get should it be this shot and then that shot? Should this shot be longer? Do we need that shot? No, let's try that shot before this one. A lot of that kind of fussing around, but this was super fun. I like the sequence a lot. I just like her, in her dialogue with the pilot and everything, and
Right.
it's good stuff. And there's a little gag with the droid, sort of, wigging
That
out.
was such a nod to the Kenner R2D2.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah, no, and that was another one where Dave's like, "It's this droid." He'd he'd hold his phone up.
Boys, it's like, no, you have to do this one.
Yeah, with
What I like about the sequence is the collision of the craft with air. Now, that might sound odd, but when we normally see craft in space, it's very clean, it's very simple, it just glides through. There's some pitch on these crafts, like moving around.
Yeah,
which is pretty normal, right? So it's
and you get the atmospherics when you see her out of the corner of the cockpit windows and stuff. It's not as sharp as a lot of times that is in space battles. It's like, no.
Yeah, it can't be too perfect. Star Wars cannot be perfect. The bumps and
figuring out a good one of the things we did differently on this than we've done on previous seasons is the bike she was riding on, because generally the way these were rigged in the past is that somebody would move the bike and the rider would kind of like respond to it, which is sort of wrong. You want the rider to kind of lean into a turn and then the bike tips.
Yeah, the follow, right.
So we've figured out, we worked with the props guys and stuff building this one and rigs in a way that the she could lean and then the bike would tip, and that just gave it a much better look than what we'd had previously. Didn't look as stiff.
There's Merle the loft cat.
Yeah, so that's the puppet. That's legacy effects right there.
Nice.
I wasn't paying attention earlier. I can't remember if there are any CG shots in this sequence or not, but yeah, that's the puppet. And it was just, I remember that was one of those things where Dave was like sending me an iPhone video, texting me an iPhone video, like, check this out. And it was like a test, just them testing. Like, oh my God, that's perfect. And it's beautiful.
Right.
I can see him being like a little kid, like giddy about it.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, sure. That's fun.
The funny thing is that I was actually obsessing about the scooper that Sabine was actually using to feed the cat. I was kind of like, well, that's like a scooper I have. Like, I want like a spork. I want like a spork. They had over a Galaxy's Edge or something like that.
Yeah.
I was wondering if that hologram puck was like a repurposed version of the episode 1 line or something of toys, because it looks very much like that.
Yeah, I mean it's a new prop, but yes, I'm sure design wise for sure.
Right.
Well, also if you remember in Obi-Wan when he was talking with like Bail Organa. They had those kind of pucks as well.
Right, that's true.
Yep.
Or did he have the razor?
I will ask a version of this question because you may not know this. It's asked in there is, do you know how many puppeteers were needed to bring Merle to life? And if you don't know the practical answer of that, then the reverse of that would be how many animators would it take to bring the CGI version of Merle to life?
For a given shot, it would take one animator would do it, but puppeteering, I don't know. I'm gonna guess 3, 2 at a minimum, maybe 3. Grogu's 3.
Right.
Right.
There's always Mike doing most of the body head work, and then a couple other people doing maybe a hand or the face stuff with the RC stuff. But the Loftcat, I don't know. In fact, I don't think I was on set any of the time they were doing Loftcat stuff, so I'm not sure exactly. But just looking at them, got to assume it's at least 2.
Yeah, easily.
I love the fact that, especially because they're supposed to be Jedis or Dark Jedis or whatever that, but having Shin have the Padawan braid was such a nice touch. Mm-hmm. And finally mentioned
now you have me doing nothing but watching to see if she blinks.
We'll
brought that up.
All I'm doing now is just sitting here dead staring at her eyes.
It'll happen occasionally, but only very rarely. Like I said, if it's a drinking game,
not enough to get you drunk.
Very sober.
That is fantastic.
I wonder if that was a conscious thing to cut around her blinks.
I don't know. And I don't know if it was a conscious thing with her.
Oh, true.
Like there was a little flutter blink in that shot.
Just
barely. Yeah.
Little eyelid movement.
But nothing else.
I know. Staring.
My
eyes would get so dry. Oh,
that smoke. Oh, there was that end.
No, the smoke, and I gotta like that.
And Paul Darnell's portrayal of Marek was very, very good. I mean, it's very much like obviously Inquisitor-esque but his motions were fantastic.
And a cool, this is a very, very much a Rebel shot. There's a thing where she comes out and sees, maybe we passed it already, some ships going by toward the city.
Yeah, maybe
anyways,
the capital.
the shots where Dave is like,
might have been in the
"Look,
first shot.
it's exactly this shot." But
Well,
yeah.
it's also like, for example, which we're breaking down is when Sabine finally goes with Ahsoka, is you putting together the epilogue of Rebels and doing a live action. That it was basically shot for shot exactly what the cartoon was.
Yep. Yeah, there were certain places where he absolutely this is it.
Is it right here?
This shot,
Yeah.
and
It
the
was
shot
Rebels,
after he had exact reference, and they're not like pixel accurate, but in terms of
Right.
feel and just composition and all that,
Yeah.
there was a pair of shots that he had exact examples from Rebels for us to look at and mimic.
Well, like all of us were saying, well, is this the same scene because Ahsoka's not in the white outfit yet? Like that's how we were breaking it down.
Yeah, for sure. And there's Huyang. He was another fantastic animatronic from Legacy. And so most of the time in shots like this, where he's just standing there, kind of being himself, turning his head, talking, he's practical. Like that shot, we leaned over a camera, this shot, he becomes digital. And, there's possibility if there are shots here that are digital that I've forgotten are digital. But if I like this, he's digital in this shot because he turns and walks away. Now he could walk. They had a version of him that could walk, but you couldn't have him turn away from camera and do that because the puppeteer was behind him walking. Anyway, so he's digital in that shot, but all the other shots where he was there talking and turning his head and all that, he's practical. So he was another great mix of both things.
Yeah, that is awesome. Really cool. I would have assumed he would have been largely, if not entirely, digital.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely not a thing where you can put a guy in a suit, but they made a great. So you would think, that would be a good candidate for being all digital, but the Legacy guys really came up with a great version.
They have some amazing stuff that they accomplish.
And I don't know what the difference is in technology, but it used to be animatronics. One of the problems was they'd always be have really sharp, kind of almost shaky sort of turns and stops. But his head moves so smoothly. If he turns and looks at somebody or somebody else, it just looks great.
So, question on left field, Hal. Who has the most sass, K2 or Huyang?
Oh, good question. They're I think they're on par, but they have a different. K is more sarcastic, kind of understated way, whereas Huyang's got a drier, way to sort of cut you down. But they're both pretty sassy droids, that's for sure.
You were just going for the thing that Huyang is got to be because he's British. That's what you're going for, not. I see how it is.
Well, later on, he basically says to Sabine, "You suck, and you're the worst Jedi ever." So it's kind of
he definitely has no qualms. His zero qualms. Huyang about just saying the most brutal truth to somebody.
Because he's for the younglings.
And and K2 Alan did a British accent with K, so he's sort of British, but he's not. He's not David Tennant.
It's sort of an in between.
Yeah.
So how much work did you guys do with the Night Sisters later on when you were on Corellia?
I don't know how much. I don't know if any modification of the makeup was needed or any of that. We had to obviously do the little floating orbs that surround Sabine and lead her away and things like that. And the sword, there was effects to do with the sword that they give to Diana's character. But I don't know beyond that if much work had to be done. This, by the way, this table setup, the way it rises out of the floor, that was all built for real. It was really cool.
That's awesome.
That was awesome.
And we all said we want that in our living rooms.
Yeah, totally.
It's the new sunken breakfast nook.
This was a neat set because it's
Yeah, right?
enclosed. You know, it has a complete ceiling and everything. So when you walk up the ramp and come into it, it's pretty easy to, you know, let your mind,
That's cool.
you know, make you
I think that would be beneficial for the actors and others on set
for
to
sure.
have that kind of, you know, Ashley. Yang is for the younglings.
And for those of you who haven't, visit our T Public store because we're joking, but there is a T-shirt right there.
And Hu Yang Clan ain't nothing to force with.
Nothing to force. That's right.
Rosario, by the way, absolutely. Actually, I haven't met anyone yet on this show who's been unpleasant, like a pain in the butt or anything. But she is especially charming, friendly, chatty. You know, you'll just be sitting somewhere, and all of a sudden she'll just like kind of plop down next to you and start chatting to you about something, you know, which is so nice, you know.
Very personable.
Yeah.
So
John and I had the fortune to actually do a photo op with Ashley Eckstein and Rosario together, and it was just awesome just seeing them.
I met her in Orlando in March, and I said, "I'll see you in London," just off the cuff remark. And when I saw her in London, she went, "You made it!"
Wow,
that's awesome.
She's pretty great. She's pretty great. Great energy on set, which is especially helpful on long days and stuff. You know, it's really great.
Yeah.
So I think
I also love the fact that both Rosario and Iman both put it into the universe, saying, "Man, I would love to play this role," and that's what got the ball rolling for them to end up playing the roles.
Yep.
He was a great Ezra Bridger. Like, I really enjoyed his portrayal.
Yeah.
So I had a question from a few minutes back there. Oh, well, let's do that one first. So once we got it up, is Ashley is one of our hosts for the Rebels Revisited show, and she's asking, what's something that you saw on Rebels that you were most excited about bringing to the live action?
Oh, from an animation standpoint, it's got to be Chopper. I mean, he was super fun. He's got a droid. And
I would say that's an answer she was very fond of hearing right now. So.
I mean, it was fun to do well, talk about droids with sass, by the way.
Oh yeah.
Since around that, but you know, he's just got so many funny Chopperisms. His little like thing he does, and you know, and stuff. And it's just the way he grumbles, and the fact that is like he can do a lot more things than most droids that have his form factor. You know, like R2, super cute. I always love R2 because I go back to, you know, I'm old. But and the way he could like kind of dance on 2 feet and make his little, you know, sounds and stuff. But Chopper's got a ton of other things he can do. He's got those little arms that come out. His head can kind of
bobble
and jump up and down and do things. And by the way, the props team built a great physical version of him that could do almost all that stuff. It didn't have fully articulated little arms. It had little arms that could be in or out, but not fully articulated. The head really did a ton of stuff. I was amazed. But we did tons of animation of him, and it was super fun, super duper fun. I really enjoyed it.
They brought out the practical version in Anaheim for the Ahsoka panel. And then now in Batuu, I don't know when the last time you were there, but one of the last times I was there, Chopper was roaming around and his head does that bobble and he, you know, cruises around and does his thing.
I want to see those little 2-legged droids they have.
Yeah, that was like a test that they did a while back, and unfortunately I haven't come across them. But yeah, those were amazing.
This is such a nod to Ray Park in Phantom Menace.
Episode 1. Yeah.
I get you, but you know, this technology exists in the universe, so she's using it. I get it. It is a parallel, but you know, it's a spy droid. or spy, whatever.
Sounds
Spy
just
probe.
like the
Spy
probe
probe.
that he sent out, yeah.
Yeah.
And the regular probe droids. It's got that.
Puppet.
So before I was going to ask
Cute.
a question from the chat from a while back. Bruce is asking, with the newer technologies and the things that you're using now, how long does it take to get an idea from concept to screen? And compare that slightly with how long it would have taken with animation technologies from the past.
I don't know that it takes any longer or less long to get from a sketch to a final spaceship or costume or set or visual effect or animated character. I'm not sure it takes,
It's just
like if I compare it to, what the legacy guys do, where they start out with drawings and end up with a physical thing that moves, or if a 2D animation where you start with drawings and then you end with drawings, but moving drawings of final design.
Right.
I think it's similar. I don't think the technology definitely hasn't sped up things. Maybe in part because we're always being asked to do more and more complex things, and no matter how much computing power we have and how powerful our tools are and how experienced our artists are, they're always being asked to do stuff that's harder and harder. So, honestly, in terms of the work that I do, animation, character animation, spaceship animation, whatever, I was talking to somebody about this the other day. The way that animators actually animate, where they're looking at their screen, they see the character. Let's say it's a character, and you click on the wrist and you kind of move it over here, and you say, okay, I want it to be here on frame 24, and then you scrub a little further forward in the shot, and you say, I want it to be over here on frame 55, and so then it just kind of moves linearly between those two spots, which looks terrible because it's mechanical. And so then you go, okay, sort of halfway between those 2 points, I want it up here, click. Now you've got a nice arc, which is a little nice. That method of animating in the computer hasn't changed in 30 years. Like we use motion capture now for characters that are naturally humanistic. We use facial capture, and other technologies have come along. But when the animators need to animate something, like it's a creature that can't be motion captured or whatever, that method of animating really hasn't changed much in the last 30 years. So I don't know. I don't feel like things have gotten a lot faster. I just feel like we can do more. It still takes us the same amount of time. It's just we can do more.
the tools have been altered slightly.
Yeah, exactly. So
Well, and I guess that when you put it that way and think about it, a lot of the tools in that is all your little anchor points and things that you can move are really like the armatures in a stop motion claymation sort of thing, and
exactly,
you're doing the same thing. You're just using something else to do it.
and the departments are very analogous. Like we have people who design a character, usually 2D artwork of some kind. It might be digital painting, but it's 2D. Then somebody models it in the computer as a 3D model, but that's like somebody sculpting the character.
Mm-hmm.
And then the riggers put the rig in it so that we can move it. And that's like with a stop motion puppet, that's like building the metal armature that's inside.
Right.
And then there's people who do all the texturing and all that, which is just like someone painting a puppet, painting the skin here and the cloth there and whatever. So the departments are very similar. And I don't think that the digital version is faster. The only thing, well, they're more than just this, but an example of a thing that doing things digitally affords us that's difficult to do in the real world is when you have a character and now you need 100 of those characters.
Mm-hmm.
That we can do more easily because we can kind of reproduce a bunch of them, but some of them are shorter and taller, and we can change the color of their costumes or swap out hats or vests or whatever. There are ways with technology to make a crowd of them faster than you could if you had to actually hand build every single one.
Or not to painting on a matte painting like they did for the big shots of like the hangars with all the stormtroopers back in the day.
Right. Exactly.
Painting all the
And now all those stormtroopers can be actual 3D stormtroopers with a little bit of ambient movement on them. Now, does it make the movie better or the shot better? Depends on how the director uses those tools. There are ways to use those tools where they actually affect how good the movie is and how believable and credible and how real the world is. There's also ways to use those tools in a way that really doesn't make the movie any better at all. And in some ways, it detracts from the movie because now you're staring at some effect that you can tell is an effect, and blah, blah, blah. So, it's just like the visual effects tools of 40 years ago. They're like superpowers for directors. They can be used for good or evil, and with great power, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot we can do with visual effects now that we couldn't do 40, 50 years ago, but none of that power guarantees a good movie or a good result. It always has to be used with taste and smarts and all that stuff. So,
Right.
and none of those rules of like what makes a good movie, it's been the same thing since the beginning of people first started getting up in front of a campfire to act out how they killed the woolly mammoth. You know what I mean? Like telling a good story is telling a good story, and no amount of special effects is going to improve.
So
that.
John, with the map and how Sabine's ciphering everything, do you think she's got some pirate in her?
Certainly.
For sure.
Using the stars to navigate, very pirate.
She needs that. She
This
needs.
way.
She needs Jack's compass to
Yeah.
things she
This
wants most.
Indeed. So when it came to like doing the Loth Cat, who starts and creates the version? Is it you guys make a digital version that they then work off of to create the puppet, or vice versa, or is there more of a collaboration somewhere in between? Because that's got to be, I mean, something like that's got so much detail, it has to be, exact on both ends, right?
Yeah, I mean, usually if we
That was a great fight.
if our plan is to have a creature that's going to be a bit of both, like we know we're going to be able to do some shots practically and some shots CG, then usually the practical happens first, and then we'll match it CG,
That
make it
makes
look
sense.
like same fur and the same dimensions and same
Right.
coloring and all that. I think it would be extremely tough for us to create a CG character and then go to Legacy and say, all right, match that. They could do it. I mean, they're
Right.
super talented,
Yeah.
but it would be harder, I think. Whereas it's better for us to let's just start with the puppet.
And you would be able to alter, like if there's a size discrepancy or something, a lot easier than they would if they were trying to match what you were doing.
For sure. I mean, that's one of the great things about building it physically first, is you really can get it dialed into this is how big it's going to be, because they'll build like a rough version first and put it next to the actress and say, should it be bigger or smaller? Let's put a lens on it. What do you think? Figure all that out. And then they build it for real and it looks great. So once that's all been worked out, then we know what we're doing. We don't have to mess around.
And do you generally build it manually in the computer in 3D, or do you, once they've built something like that, do you just go ahead and 3D scan it? And
we scan it and or photo model it. Photo modeling is becoming a little more common now, where you just take tons of photos and sort of build it. And sometimes the photo model is just a rough guide. Like with fur, it's a little hard to like get an exact, because you need the topography of the skin underneath that the fur is growing out of. So you kind of have to extrapolate that, because it's not like Legacy gives us a furless version of it. We scan and or photo model the furred version and then have to infer where the skin is at and then grow our own fur out of it. And it's kind of tricky. But for a lot of things like Hu Yang, my guess, and I wasn't intimately involved with this, but my guess with Hu Yang is that Legacy probably had CAD files of their own. Like we had this with K2SO. Because they,
right.
Even though he was CG 100% of the time, Dean's group over in anyways, the Creature group over in England built a physical full-size version of him
for reference,
kind of as a design experiment. Really, just have something to look at and put next to actors and stuff. It was never filmed or even intended to be filmed, but in doing that, they had CAD files because they 3D printed a lot of the parts, and they sent those to us, and that was a good sort of leg up when we started building our CG.
Yeah, of course.
This sequence, that shots of the T6 flying, taking off from the tower, which we just passed by, and flying toward the fight was another little gap where Dave was like, I need some exciting shots of the, he did a bunch of versions. In the end, he wanted some shots that were a little more like the Falcon flying through Cloud City, but with a little more energy, because obviously there's an urgency here. But then I had done some stuff that was a little more modern film language, kind of long lens with like towers whipping by and a little shakier. And he's like, nah, let's get it back a little more toward Empire Strikes Back, Falcon through the Cloud City kind of language, but with urgency. Anyway, so it developed that way. We got
Neil Scanlon, I think.
Neil Scanlon. Right, you're right. I had Dean stuck in my head, but Neil. No, thank you very much. Very lovely guy, incredibly talented, and he has the nicest.
And here's the big joke that Qui-Gon is watching right now, saying, "Wait a minute,
hey, wait a minute." Yeah, exactly. I saw those memes that cracked me up.
For our friend Ray.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Neil has the most beautiful car, by the way. He has a I'm blanking again. What's the French car that has the Citroen? He has a Citroen, but kind of a 70s era one that's just, or is it Citroen, or do you have the Lotus? I think it's somebody else. He's got this beautiful car because I saw it at Pinewood on Rogue One. I was like, oh my God, whose car is that? And it was his car. But now I've got to look back at my photos and see if it was a Lotus or a Citroen. But
so I do have to tell you that because we haven't seen you since before Celebration, but we stayed right by the tube stop. So when we were going go to Celebration stuff, we had to go to the escalator. We're thinking about the videos that you were showing us.
You told us to go see it, and we saw it. We went to the Canary Wharf tube station.
Yeah, that was a crazy. That night was just nuts. We got there at, I don't know, 6, 7 o'clock at night, or maybe a little later. But anyway, we were there till 5 or 6 in the morning, and then we had to get out. And it was just this mad scramble to get out of there before the commuters started showing up. And the last thing they were shooting was just sort of like B-roll of troopers running through the various corridors, because that was before the rejiggering of the end part where Cassian and K2 and Jin get found out while they're trying to steal the plans, and then they have to make their way back out of that complex and across the beach, which of course is not in the final film. But so them running out of the place, and they needed all this footage of stormtroopers running here and there, and through corridors and stuff. And the guys in the stormtrooper suits were just knackered. They were just beat, and they were just getting shouted at, like, "Run over here! Go ahead! Right, you guys come down here!" Because we were running out of time, and they had to get the stuff. I remember seeing some of the guys. There was this little group of guys who just were hiding behind one of the things, and they'd taken their helmets off, and they were just like, "I'm done. I'm done."
There's
a shot of that.
Yeah, if you Google Canary Wharf stormtrooper, there's some behind the scenes shot of a handful of them sitting on a bench in front of the big sign, the underground sign.
Yes, well, that's something we've definitely learned from London, is knackered.
Yeah, and they look it. So that's
that was 5 or 6 in the morning, and
our hotel was literally around the corner.
Yeah,
we stayed literally 5-minute walk from that tube station, so it was wonderful.
So first and foremost, I want to thank Hal for coming and joining us for this evening. What an honor and a treat. And also want to plug the fact that if you will be with us for the San Francisco part of our family vacation this summer, you too can meet Hal. So we're very excited to meet you in person when we come to San Francisco.
Oh, yeah. Maybe by that fountain there.
My old stomping ground.
That fountain.
That's gonna be a lot of fun. But Hal, thank you so much for being, kicking off this program and coming on with us again. It's always as someone on, I guess you want to call it X now, said that every time you're on our show, it seems like a masterclass. So thank you very much for coming on.
Indeed.
Thanks.
So
I appreciate it. By the way,
Great.
speaking of X, I've exited X, but just in case.
We saw that when we were promoting the show.
Yeah.
I think for good. We'll see if it sticks. They give you a little time.
Right.
If you deactivate your account, you have a certain amount of time to log back in and save it if you want. But I think I'm probably
Good without it.
good.
Yeah.
I think I'm good.
X no longer marks the spot.
Exactly so.
Oh yeah.
So, Dave, next week we're back with Chapter 2. I think we have a guest. I think we have a VCN Hall of Famer. What do you think?
Well, you just narrowed it down right there because there's only so many people in the VCN Hall of Fame right now. But we are going to have actor, performer, creator Chris Bartlett.
Oh,
join us.
good lad.
Who was in this episode?
Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
Please say hello for me.
We
We
will.
absolutely will. And also, we had announced that if you will be at our event in Los Angeles part of the trip, you will actually get to see Chris. So,
Summon Villainy Cantina.
Summon Villainy. Yep, absolutely. So very excited about everything that's going on. Dave, we got a whole bunch of stuff on the VCN coming up. What's going on?
Okay, there's always stuff going on in the VCN. If you are looking for information on Japan, information on anything going on in Star Wars, join us on Tuesday nights. Come out and hang out live on the Zoom and ask questions to everyone that shows there. We talk about anything and everything, and we even hawk the Trek when Notman's not there. So please come and join us for that. But always on Sundays, the first and third Sunday of the month, you can join the Jedi Archives guys. They are reviewing all things comic books. And then the second and fourth Sunday of the month is going to be the Unifying Force. And with the Unifying Force, that we do just that. Any and all things film, television, Star Wars, where these things came from. Like, we could totally have an episode discussing the parallels between this episode of Ahsoka and classic samurai film. So that's the kind of thing that you would see there. So join us for any and all of those. I think coming up next week on the channel, we have a new episode of Daughters of the Galaxy, and they are going to be looking ahead for all of 2024. And then if Ahsoka wasn't enough Rebels content for you, on Monday nights, we have Rebels Revisited. And Ashley and Mark will always, they'll get you caught up on all the things. Like, come in there and ask questions. It's like, hey, this thing happened in Ahsoka, and I don't know what the deal is with that. Oh, it probably came from Rebels, and they can totally tell you all about it.
Yes. So a lot of great stuff. A lot of things we're very excited about. As we announced, we will be at the ICCC Con in Nashville, Tennessee this coming October, and on tour at many different cons and a whole bunch of stuff coming on. John, you have an incredible lineup of MegaCon coming up with basically it's like 75% Star Wars, which is fantastic.
Crazy. That's going to be a busy day, a busy weekend.
Yes, absolutely. But once again, thank you so much for everybody joining us tonight. We had an incredible crowd, very lively in there. But once again, our guest, Hal, thank you so much for joining us again tonight.
Amazing.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's
Always a
our
pleasure.
absolute
Great episode. Superb.
So, John, anything you want to say before we go?
Oh, just superb. Thank you, Hal, for coming back on again. You're one of my favorite guests. Honestly, your insight into your work and the episodes is amazing. And it kind of makes me look at episodes in a different way. So that's great. Thank you for doing that.
Thanks, Jonathan.
And Jeff.
Just amazing to hear anything you talk about, and when it comes to the production and the process that you guys go through when it comes to creating this amazing work. Really love listening to it, and it'll be great to meet you in person finally in the summertime.
Yep. Thanks, Jeff.
Dave Filoni.
Absolutely. Ahsoka.
Do you have your hat? By the way, do you have your hat next to you?
Of course,
Yep,
I have
there
my
we go.
hat next to me.
And there he is.
And I've seen this man on Peter Pan's flight.
Funny story about Dave is that he wore this to a Comic-Con and like was photobombing all the 501st comic photo ops, and they had to do double takes because they thought actually Dave showed up at a Comic-Con.
A little bit taller than Dave.
Well, that was the thing is I'd walk down the aisle and then you would just see people turn, and then when they looked up, they would go, "Oh." But yes, thank you, Hal, for coming again. And just like I'll reiterate what everybody else said, and I learn something every single time, and that's the absolute greatest thing. Is there's always so many surprises and insights that you have in the process of what goes on here.
It's fun to come on and share for sure.
We love it.
Well, greatly appreciate it. So thank you very much for joining us tonight. Remember, next week you join us with VCN Hall of Famer Chris Bartlett. But until then, from all of us, may the force be with you.
Always.